So about 6 years ago, we were bored at work and my friend and I decided to go and do the Myers-Briggs test. And as you can imagine, I got INFP and he got INFJ. But something that really took me aback was his anger towards me for getting INFP as a result. He kept asking me to do the test again, and he said quite angrily, "You're not an introvert, you're a fucking extrovert." Now, to be fair to him, I was a bit of an extrovert at that time in my life. I was always trying to distract him because I was so bored at work, and I was not very sure with what I was doing in my life, and I used to drink quite a lot. But I do think it might be quite interesting to dissect the differences in perception of introversion and extroversion when you're comparing INFPs and INFJs. I guess an INFJ might see someone like me who's a bit scatterbrained and jumps from idea to idea all the time as being extroverted. Now, on the flip side, even though I never look at an INFJ and think that they're an ENFJ, I don't think I've ever done that, I do look at their social side as being, a little bit off-putting because I'm an INFP and I've got that sort of extroverted feeling nemesis side to me. I mean, there were so many times when I was younger with INFJs that I would be a little bit surprised at how focused they were on their little social groups. And it's not to say that INFJs to me are very emotionally expressive or anything like that, but sometimes when I'm hanging out with them, it does feel like they're trying to get you into their little social sphere. They're just a lot more conscious about how social groups are and how important they are. Now, there are a lot of INFJs who don't seem to have any social sphere at all, but you can still kind of feel the depression in them that they don't have that. Whereas I think INFPs, with their social groups, they're just not very conscious of them. They might have a big social group, but they almost forget that they've got it. I don't know, it's very different than an INFJ. At any rate, I do remember at the time I felt a little bit offended at my friend's anger that I had tested as an introvert, because as far as I was concerned, I was living alone, I didn't have many friends, I was alone all the time. I didn't have many friends in the office. Just because I was talking all the time and distracting him, I felt like he wasn't quite understanding what a lonely, melancholic figure that I really was. And I remember even me being quite childish, thinking, how dare he think that he's the only introvert when he's got his coffee meetups and he's got his family and I live alone and I'm in bed all weekend feeling sad, Either way, I think we've both grown since then, and a few years later he talked about how I am actually quite an introvert and he recognized that. And something that has changed between us and our dynamic is that about 8 years ago when we first became friends, the dynamic was very much that I would talk about all of my problems and dramas and he would give me advice. And I don't think the relationship worked very well like that. I don't like being given advice. And I think that's the case for a lot of INFJs and INFPs. Sometimes the advice is very useful, and then sometimes it's not so useful. And what's actually evened out over the years is he started to open up a lot more to me, and I think he realized that it was actually good for him to talk about what's going on in his life and talk about his dramas and his complex emotions, and realize that I will listen to him. And I much prefer our friendship that way. It's a bit more, it's very much 50-50 now, with him talking about the struggles he's going through and me talking about the struggles I'm going through. And I think when I look at the INFJ-INFP relationship, a lot of the time the INFJ, they might feel a little bit uncomfortable by the amount of extroverted intuition, the amount of ideas the INFP is putting out there, but they'll latch on to one of them and they'll really cherish that new idea that maybe they hadn't thought about. And one of the great things INFJs do with INFPs, I think, is they really encourage them to be their authentic self. INFJs usually don't want you to be something that you're not. They want you to be exactly who you are, and they actually want to show that there's a place for people like you in the real world. So anyway, those are just some thoughts I've had about the intertype dynamics between the INFP and the INFJ and how they might misinterpret each other at first. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, and I'll see you next time.